Hello, team. Welcome back to another Line War cast. This is your map. Our two players today are Die, also known as SE2 in red, and Keaton901 in blue. Both players are actually spawning very close to each other. So this will be good for me because these are the situations that, as a player, I generally tend to either panic or just overall flounder in. So we can see the vision of SE2 in red, seeing that there's two barracks and one factory on the way. Two factories, in fact, for Keaton, who's throwing down two more barracks behind this. Three more barracks. So Keaton, obviously, there's only four squads of infantry. So Keaton didn't pick all of the starting territories. So this has allowed them to go for like two more barracks or whatever the number is. It's five barracks total and two factories against four factory for SE2, all tanks and no gas. So there's enough for in the bank for red to be able to get a gas here. This run by is not going to work. The name of the game here is that blue needs to wait for a little bit for these barracks to come online. There's no sense in pushing. Unless Keaton thinks that they're able to actually jump on top of these factories before any of the tanks come out. Blue's going for artillery, whereas red, as we've seen, is just going for straight tank. And I think it's actually tanks out of all of them. Yes, it's four tanks. Four tanks, and red is going to have to defend this gas. These infantry for red are going over here to try to cap this gas. What I assume is because red thinks that this gas is a little bit too exposed. First three tanks all done for red immediately. And so this answers the question, can you go for factory tank and afford it? And the answer is yes. It's really just this gas that red needs to figure out. And what I assume is going to happen is that red's going to take this gas and then SC2 is going to drive across this field. Keaton's got four artillery pieces now. The fifth and sixth are on the way. And this is one heck of a game already out the gate. 272 income for red and 248 for blue. Keaton's in the negative, but it doesn't super matter as long as Keaton can continue producing out of all of these production facilities. This top barracks isn't really doing much, but over time Keaton should get a lot more infantry, right? Which allows them to cap more quickly over time. There goes the first gas for SE2. Three infantry in the forest. I mean, this is super smart from Keaton. If these infantry just get lost, which I think they do, red can't see these infantry, so over time Keaton could just pop out and try to snipe the gas. I don't know if Keaton's thinking about that or if this is just lucky coincidence. Definitely can see the gas here because of the anti-stealth on the refinery. And with now 6 tanks out in total, or 7 tanks, pardon me, in total for red, with another 4 on the way, this is going to be very powerful. This will be hard to stop if you're blue. Artillery can do okay against tanks if they're grouped up and constantly firing, but in an open field like this, I feel like red's going to be able to just kind of dip, dive, dodge and dive, or whatever the heck the joke is from dodgeball, around these different things. Income-wise, 308 for SE2 and 260 for blue or Keaton. This is a tough position. I'm not really sure how blue's going to play this out. There's nothing being produced out of the factory, the two factories. And spoilers, I've lost to SC2 doing this so many times. It's a very strong build, going for just if the player who opens up with this many tanks can find damage, and in the meantime when there is no damage to be found, just cap all this territory. I mean, tanks are great at capping. It's a very hard strat to beat. SC2 still in the lead economically, 332 total, making 40 a minute. Keaton's losing 106 income a minute. And some of the production facilities aren't even able to produce things. This would have been a very, not alarming, but I can't imagine this was a comfortable start for blue. This many tanks is going to be able to just eat this army up. We can see exactly how the trade's going to go. Very interested to see what Keaton's going to do to try to get out of this. But it's going to be very difficult. There's no air units for blue. If there were some helicopters on the way, I mean, that would mean that there weren't as many barracks or whatever. It'd be a whole different game. But as for like ground and pound armies, red is, I mean, overwhelmingly in the lead. I mean, this many tanks can essentially move onto this many units at this point. This is the play from blue to start breaking out over on this side. Again, I mean, there's a lot of barracks from blue. So if in theory Keaton took more time and was able to get more units out, they can still body block these tanks. Infantry can be very effective against tanks. 320 income for Keaton at this point, 368 for SC2. He was going for the second gas, which is super needed given the fact that these 4 tanks, or these 4 factories, are only making tanks still. I don't even need to move the screen. We can see where the action is. There's no other units anywhere else on the map. Keaton's expanding to the north. Unfortunately for Keaton, SC2 is able to expand down here. This is the play. Keaton actually owns this territory, capping where they can. It's been a good job of blue to keep enough units around the producers that SC2 has to think twice about attacking. I mean, we can look at the vision. SC2 can see that there's a decent amount of units in front of the production. So these tanks are going to go to the right to clear this army. And with this many tanks at home, I think red was going to be fine to defend. The 2 gases are pretty much locked down, which is a huge advantage for red. Good amount of units in the north for Keaton, who has now stopped sending everything from this top barracks to the north, which is the play. So now all of these units can go to the front. 344 income for Keaton and 404 for SC2. So Keaton's been making, you know, making gains in the economic department for sure. The big thing to watch here is the gas for SE2, which right now is still in the green with this many tanks. I mean, it's 3,800 tanks, I think, for on both sides of the map here. They're enormous armies. I don't even think all of these units against all of these tanks would be able to defend it. But that being said, I'm generally a poor judge of how good tanks are. If there's a unit that, when I play, I struggle with the most, it would be tanks. They can do a lot of damage very quickly and catch you off guard. Commando down here for Keaton, that's huge. Unfortunately for Keaton, SC2 has, I mean, just like the perfect defense around these refineries. Really, I mean, 3 tanks on this one, 2 tanks on the northern one. Keaton can only expand to the north here, and without building a dock or an airport, it's not possible for blue to get off this part of the map. And red has more map to cap on this big landmass if we broke it down. I mean, discounting these, I mean, these 3 infantry are going to take a while to cap anything. Here come the tanks on the right flank. They're going to just try to retreat move past the army to get to the north. which is a pretty good idea. I would have almost suspected these tanks to start going up the left side as this was happening. Here comes the third gas for SC2. And with 4 factories still just going tanks, a third gas is definitely needed. The strat, I feel like you have to keep in mind where your gases are going to be. With this many tanks, SC2 can now defend it, so it's actually a very smart move to take these 2 first, and this is the third one. 2 tanks get around to the back. We'll see if the plan for red is to cap with them or to try to attack the production after they got by. Income-wise, 464 for SC2 and 416 for Keaton. This is where this infantry kind of advantage comes into play, because Keaton was able to cap this much quicker with all these infantry. I think that's how it's working. Like that's why Keaton's able to get back into the game here. There's going to be a lot of infantry units for Keaton. It's just that with all these tanks, if Keaton makes one bad move and moves away from some producers, the tanks are going to be on top of all these barracks and factories immediately and take them down relatively quick. It's still only tanks from SC2. 4 factories going tanks and 3 gases. The economy looks good for red, who's just passed 500 total income. Here comes the moment. Keaton is going for it. Or at least going for it a little bit. On the right side, Keaton might get a good trade. Through the middle, the tanks are just going to be so good on the ground. Commandos are the best units to be trying to do this with. If the tanks couldn't see them, we can see some of the commandos kind of skipping in and out of vision. But this refinery and all the factories kind of help with the unit vision, so red isn't going to get bamboozled by commandos. Like, one of the best ways to deal with tanks is just send out commandos. Tanks have horrible vision. The commandos won't be able to be seen by the tanks. But because this fight is happening so close to all this production, and there's enough tanks, the commandos aren't able to get that kind of stealth bonus. I like that this commando is still trying to poke and see what it can do. If Keaton's kept this one commando alive, that's actually pretty cool. The whole time just poking in and out. Airport now for SC2. Helicopters potentially as the play, and this is the difference. SC2 is backing up when these tanks are getting poor fights, which is great. They're very expensive units, but if you keep them alive and you have the gas to use them, it's great. Keaton sees this tank. Great reaction to be able to go over and try to attack it, stop it from capping that territory. 560 income for SC2 and 440 for Keaton. And this critical mass of tanks is starting to look very scary for red. It's actually a kind of cool build. There's so many trade routes on this map, and I don't think anyone's going to get any of them. Four tanks on the right side with another 4 coming to reinforce it, and then there are enough tanks in the center here that if any of these blue units have to move over to defend these tanks in the center are going to be able to get on top of the buildings, and that is going to be the end of the game. Unfortunately for Keaton, SC2 is sending some tanks to recap all of this territory that those 3 infantry did such a great job to capture in the first place. Yeah, see, so this 3rd commando now comes into vision because of these 2 tanks, I think. But if there was one less tank, the commandos would be able to attack the tanks without the tanks firing back. Or something close to that. It's hard to tell what Keaton should be doing to get out of this. Potentially, I don't know. Like, maybe in hindsight, if there's 2 less barracks and there's a gas, and then Keaton builds their own tanks and can fight back. But even then, I mean, it's just it's hard to compete with 4 factories worth of tanks here. Interceptors for SE2. Interceptors, another interceptor on the way. Which might just be a preemptive move in case Keaton were to go for airports and have strikers or helicopters to deal with this. But I mean, really, Keaton knows at this point. This is going to be tough. This is too many tanks. We look at SC2's gas, which is... like, it's using a ton of gas, to be fair. But these tanks are going to get by this army. And really on display is just how deadly enough tanks. If you can build tanks out of 4 factories, conserve them. I mean, really, how many tanks did SE2 lose before this push? Like, not that much, so it's just 16 minutes of continuous tanks. Well played, and for what it's worth, you know, that's a tough spot to be in if you're Keaton. So also well played for defending. Great game from both players. I hope you enjoyed it. Another Line War cast. I hope you have a great night, day, evening, whatever it is for you. Have a good one. We'll see you around. Thank you for the support. Peace, folks.